sort of know where John and Mary end up. So what's kind of the premise for this show? What are we going to learn about the characters? What's the journey like?
So when Jensen and Neil first approached me about it, that was like my first question. Was like, hey, if we know the ending, like how do we get there in a way that, as Kim Manners used to say, do what the audience wants, but in a way they don't expect. But then that kind of, my question was also the answer. Was to figure out how can we do that. And the first thing we talked about was making sure that we were not going to erase 15 years of Supernatural. Jensen and I are both big Back to the Future fans, and we talk about like the fading Polaroid. We don't want Sam and Dean to suddenly be fading. We're not rewriting anything. We're not redoing anything. This is a long-winded way of saying like I'm not going to tell you everything because we want to tell the story. But I will say that there's some hints about where we're going in the first episode, and then kind of throughout the first season. But we're gonna pull the curtain back completely about where we are and what we're doing and what we have been doing in episode 13.
Great.
And it may or may not involve that handsome gentleman over that way. So yeah.
Just a follow on that though.
Yeah.
So it's I would say it's a little challenging being that it's so close to the beginning of the original Mothership in terms of timeline.
Yeah.
Or prequel series right now are like Rings of Power.
Sure.
Where you can push it back way in the past.
Sure.
Worry about that kind of
Actually, no. Like, it was actually one of the benefits of it because one of the things we talked about early on was how do we expand the Supernatural universe? And we found, like my questions were the same as most everybody's questions. It was like, hey, this is cool, but how's it going to work? But because we're a show that deals in the paranormal and the supernatural, and it's a show that also pushed itself, in previous seasons to do different, weird, out-of-the-box ideas, we found that we actually had more than a few ways to peel this onion. So how we're actually doing that is top secret for now, I promise. We're not going to keep everybody guessing for too long. But it was actually a huge advantage because there is so much history, and yet there were characters like, for example, the character of Millie Winchester. Millie, you only hear her name, but so we got to talk about the fact that she's a mechanic, the fact that what her perspective was on Henry leaving. Did she know about the Men of Letters? Did she know about monsters? Suddenly, it actually gave us a whole new lane to kind of explore within the context of the show. So it wasn't limiting at all. And I'll be honest with you, putting it in 1972 so I never have to deal with cell phones or the fact that Sam always had Wi-Fi, even though they were like in the middle of nowhere, was a pure joy. Like we actually were doing research the other day and found out like cops had pagers back then. I was like, this is like, but for them this would be like getting your new iPhone. You'd be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so no, it wasn't actually limiting. I mean, did we talk about different iterations of where like a prequel type story could go? Yeah, absolutely we did. We talked about quite a few different iterations, but this one always felt more personal and a way to keep a certain handsome gentleman, also involved in a pretty direct way.
Now you mentioned the time jump. Is there like anything from the 70s, any references that you kind of took inspiration from, that you studied from? Was there anything that was particularly
the music, without question, the music. I think one of the first couple weeks. Jensen, Daniil, and Renee Reef, who's their executive, we just were kind of talking and figuring out. This was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, almost to the day. And Daniil made us a playlist of just 70s songs. And I'm blanking on the documentary's name, I'm so sorry, but they're just been released a documentary about early 70s music that was also a huge source of inspiration. I've been writing the last 4 weeks to just all the music from Moon Age Daydream, that David Bowie documentary. So a big touchstone was the music. Music was a cornerstone of Supernatural. Whether it's our unofficial theme song, Carry On, or it's like references to Metallica and AC/DC and all that other stuff. Some songs we could afford, some songs we could not. What are you going to do? But the big thing was music. The other thing, obviously, is you start to get excited about. I'm a child of the 70s, and you start getting excited about the fashion as well. There's also a lot of parallels. 2022, sadly, is not that different from 1972 in some aspects, and so that was also an appeal as well to maybe couch some stories and give it sort of a timeless feel.
As showrunner, you set the tone.
Sure.
Now,
is that true?
You do.
Okay,
do
good.
You?
Yeah.
And Supernatural is horror.
Yeah.
This is a love story.
Yeah.
Supernatural is tragic. We've seen a lot of comedy in the trailer so far.
Yeah.
What tone are you going for?
Well, Supernatural did something. There's a really great connection. I had this teacher when I was at University of Michigan who it was a comedy horror class, and it was a class where we studied the correlation between gross out comedies of the 80s and gross out horror of the 80s. And what was interesting is that there was actually a lot of parallel. Most good horror scripts give you a laugh, and it's designed to release tension, and so really the tone that we wanted was the tone that Supernatural had. Sam and Dean are really funny. Like, they are very, very funny guys, and we did some pretty broad stuff. I would say that, in terms of this, heart was a big thing for us, humor was a big thing for us, and so was horror. And so we're trying to strike the same balance that Supernatural did. Do we also kind of carve out our own little space in it? Yeah, because like you pointed out, like it is a romance. So, so yeah, I would say the tone is more of what along lines that the Mothership did. The difference being Supernatural started and was really grounded as a two-hander, and then it grew from there. We start with a pretty instant family. Like, we've got, our core four, as we call them, but then we've also got Demetria, who plays Ada, and Bianca, who plays Millie. And so that group, it's just a different dynamic from jump. And so that inherently gives you more voices, and as a result, you're going to have different types of humor, different types of drama, different types of tragedy. All the characters, especially the core four, are really kind of bound, though, in the way that all hunters are, which is some form of tragedy in their lives. And some of those we get right out of the gate, like with Carlos's backstory that you'll see in the pilot shortly. And then some of them we kind of hint at with Lata's character as we move on in the season. So yeah, Supernatural was a pretty big influence on this show. So my short answer is that. But the longer answer is because we have, we have more voices, we have an opportunity to kind of stretch a little bit.
Sorry.
Do you want to take it?
Yeah, I just have speaking on about voices, and the episode knocks about like diversity in the past about Supernatural. Like, are there any, I guess, proactive steps that have been sort of taken in sort of developing a show?
I'm sorry, could you say the first part again? I'm so sorry.
About diversity.
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of like
writing
and casting and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So,
Look,
it's
it's not an indictment or a criticism of the Mothership, but it was developed a long time ago, and I fortunately I think we're being much more reflective and inclusive, and it was part of the design from the beginning. It was something that was very important to Jensen and Daniil as part of their production company, Chaos Machine, but it's also important to me. My mom is Mexican. My wife is Latin. I know some people also prefer Latinx, but that's what she prefers, so that's what I'm using. And it was very important for me to be able to see my family on screen as well. And so yeah, it was really important, and it was also just an opportunity because we were a little left of where we were, and we were starting with just more faces. It was an opportunity to do that, and it was done deliberately.